Okay, I'm gonna start. I think it's pay bays and bays. Yeah, basar. We're up to the word basar yotze lechutz pasal. It's 8 lines down, 7 lines down. 7, and you see brackets on the line. Hayotze lechutz pasal. Okay, thank Hashem that you're able to learn Torah every day. It's the of our learning. We should have the base of English. It's an exciting week. Yudtes Kislev and Hanukkah coming up. All this. It's good we can get some learning in the morning. Okay. What is that? Oh yeah. Is that what it says? Chag of Chag. Oh, it does say that, I think. That's an expression. Okay. Let's just go over a drop what we were learning before, so you'll see in the context of what this is. It's really a new piece, but it's also connected. We're talking about blood of a sacrifice that's supposed to be sprinkled on the altar. But we said that half of it went outside. We said that what's remaining inside is still kosher. Then we said blood that went inside the sanctuary that wasn't supposed to invalidates everything. And we said that if he has thoughts of bringing it inside, it doesn't invalidate it. If he has thoughts of sprinkling it outside, it does invalidate it. It's a little bit complex over here, but we did have a machlekes. Basically, Rabbi Akiva came in also. Just 1 second. Basically, said, if one of them entered inside, then Rabbi Yosef says it's still kosher, and the Chum say it's possible if it goes inside. So Rabbi Yosef argued on what we said before. That was a discussion in this. And now, Rabbi Yosef had a Kal V'Chomer. It's Kal V'Chomer to say that the remaining cup outside, if one cup enters into the sanctuary, the remaining cup outside is still kosher. He had a Kal V'Chomer. Kal V'Chomer is, if thoughts of taking it inside don't invalidate it, so for sure, and thoughts of taking it outside do invalidate it, but taking it outside itself doesn't invalidate the one that's remaining. So for sure, taking one cup inside for sure won't invalidate it, but thoughts inside don't invalidate. Okay. Anyway, now the Gemara says, Basar hayotze lechutz is pasal. Until now we're talking about dam, blood. Now we're talking about what about the flesh? Flesh is supposed to be eaten if it's a chatas. But where's it supposed to be eaten? It's supposed to be eaten in the courtyard. It's not supposed to be taken outside the courtyard. Here, it was taken outside the courtyard. It's pasal. The Gemara is going to explain where we learn that from. Anichnas lifnim. Let's say the flesh goes inside the chamber, the heichal, it's called. They're going to have to burn it. Yeah. If it enters inside the heichal, it says in the heichal it's going to be kosher. It's going to be kosher. Sheyeh badin shepasal. We really could have logically came up with a Kal V'Chomer that it should be pasal, the flesh that goes inside, and the Kal V'Chomer would go as follows. Ma b'makom shlei pasal dam shebechutz shebifnim. Kal V'Chomer goes like this. Whereas for blood, the blood that leaves the courtyard does not invalidate the blood that's remaining inside. We're talking about if there's 2 cups, one that goes outside becomes invalid, but the one that's inside remains valid. Basar hayotze lechutz is pasal, but flesh that leaves is pasal. Okay, so we're talking about chutz has a certain leniency, but nevertheless the flesh that leaves is pasal. So makim shepasal dam shebifnim es shebachutz. But when we say that blood that enters into the heichal, it does invalidate, according to the Chachamim. It does invalidate the remaining blood. That means inside is worse than outside. right? Blood that goes inside is worse than blood that goes outside. So if that's the case, so basar nichnas bifnim in adin sheyifsal, for sure flesh that goes inside for sure should be puzzle. Leaving doesn't invalidate what's remaining, but taking it inside does invalidate what's remaining. So it comes to the flesh. We are taking it outside, invalidates it. For sure, taking it inside should invalidate it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it says Hariyomer Midama. This is not the halacha. It actually says in the pasuk that if the blood enters inside, what's the pasuk? B'chol chatas asher yuva midama. Pasuk says any chatas that from its blood it enters into the holies, so it becomes invalid. So you should not eat it and it should be burnt. It says it's only the blood that invalidates it. Midama, from the blood, v'loi basar, and not the flesh. Which means that if the flesh goes inside, it does not become invalid. It says, well, it's interesting you taught that to me, because now maybe we'll say exactly the opposite. Let's say kal v'chaymer me'ata. Now we have a kal v'chaymer the other way. That meat that leaves should not be invalid. He says, "Ma b'makim shepasol dam shebefnim es shebachutz." When it comes to going inside, too close inside, into the heichal, the blood that goes inside invalidates the blood that's outside, according to the Chachamim, right? Blood that enters inside is pasol. The whole carbon becomes pasol when it's not supposed to. Basar nichnas lefnim kosher, but the meat that goes inside remains kosher. Makim shlei pasol dam shebachutz es shebefnim. So going outside, where the blood that goes outside does not invalidate the blood that's remaining. So basar yetzel chutzin edin shekosher for sure should be kosher, the flesh that goes outside. See, if going inside, the blood going inside invalidates the whole carbon, but nevertheless, the flesh that goes inside is kosher. So the blood that goes outside, which does not invalidate the whole carbon, for sure the flesh that goes outside should remain kosher. Yeah. If inside is much worse, as you see, it invalidates the whole sacrifice, and nevertheless the flesh is kosher. So the flesh that goes outside, which is not as bad, because the blood that goes outside doesn't invalidate the whole sacrifice, for sure the flesh should be kosher. He says, no, we have a pasuk that says that you can't say this. This is an important teaching. It says, that the flesh that's in the field, torn up, you shall not eat. And over here we're learning sada, field, is referring to anything that doesn't have a perimeter, which means it left the courtyard, the perimeter of the courtyard, and that we're going to learn, even though this is a drasha, it's not literally in the pasuk, it's not basar basada, it's just on the harabayas. Nevertheless, it's coming to tell me, kivin shiyatza basar chutz l'mechitzasai nasar. Once it leaves the partitions, so then it becomes prohibited. Okay, that was that Gemara. Now we're up to Tanur Rabbanan, new Brisa. So the blood, we're more strict. The blood that leaves, we're not so strict, because the blood that's remaining is kosher. Flesh that leaves, we're very strict. The flesh that leaves is invalid. It doesn't invalidate the flesh that's inside, but the flesh that leaves is invalid. The blood that goes inside invalidates the whole sacrifice, but the flesh that goes inside doesn't invalidate the whole sacrifice. So it's highly complex. I can't make a rule what's more strict. Yitan Rabbanan, done in a brisa. We're quoting a pasuk that is referring to the inauguration. Moshe got upset with Aaron and the sons for not eating the Rosh Chodesh offering when they were eininim. Right? It says, why didn't you eat it? The blood was not brought inside. You could have eaten it, which means that blood that was brought inside means you wouldn't be able to eat it. Anyway, it says now, Tanur Rabbanan started in a brisa. It says the blood wasn't brought inside. Ela kodesh pnima. It says pnima. Ainly ela pnima. What does pnima mean? inner sanctum, right? It wasn't brought inside, which would mean the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It wasn't brought into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So you should be allowed to eat it. In other words, if it would be brought in to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, then you would not be allowed to eat it. It would become invalid. It says, Heichal Minayin. But how do you know that it's also referring to, there's two rooms in the Mishkan. One room was the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, and then there was the outer room, which was called the Holies. Holies and Holy of Holies. Kodesh and Kodesh HaKadoshim. Okay? So Pnima would have meant the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So it says, how do you know it becomes invalid if the blood was brought even into the Heichal, just into the Holies? The Kodesh. Talmud Laimar, Pasuk says, Ela Kodesh, into the Holies. Now, the Shita Mikbeses takes out the word Pnima. Okay, Ela Kodesh. The Gemara says, okay, so V'yoimar Kodesh, Val Yemer Pnima. So why do you have to say the word Pnima? If it says, if Kodesh itself tells me that that the sacrifice becomes invalid if it comes into the sanctuary, then why do you have to make it look like it comes invalid if it goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim? It's already invalid. It's from the sanctuary itself. It's Kal V'chaimer, right? Right. Needless, it would be a Kal V'chaimer. Omar Rava, or maybe it's Rabbah. I need both because each one is telling me what the other one means. Gemara says this is similar to This is similar to what we learn about the law of a Kohen is allowed to eat truma, but what about his household? So it says his children, his wife, they're allowed to eat truma. His Eved Kanani, his non-Jewish slave, is allowed to eat truma. But it says in the pasuk, the Tanya was taught in a brisa. Quote a pasuk. It says that any stranger should not eat kodesh. Toishav kayin v'sacha leyechel kodesh. A toishav kayin, the one that dwells with the kayin, or a hired worker should not eat the kodesh, even though he's working for the kayin. So what is this referring to? So toishav, the brisa says, zeh kani kinyan. This is a type of Jewish slave, an eved ivri, that was acquired for 50 years. Ilam means forever, but it means 50 years. So it says that he is not allowed to eat the truma. He's not really part of the family. He's acquired, but he's not really part of the Kayin family, so he can't eat the truma. That's because his ear was, they bored a hole through his ear. Remember, he went for 7 years, or for 6 years, and then he decided to stay longer.
But he didn't want to stay, so then they did the whole.
No, he wanted to stay, so they did the whole.
Uh-huh.
So how long does he stay? Till Yovel, for 50 years. So after 50 years, he goes out. Yeah, that's the limit. Yeah, there's nothing past 50. So I know that the Eved Ivri that's in the home for 50 years can't eat truma. Sacher, what does it say? The hired worker. Zeh kani kinyan shanim. He's only acquired for 6 years, right? And then he goes free. It says like this. 1 second. He can't eat truma also. 1 second. If the one that's acquired for 50 years can't eat truma, for sure the one that's just hired temporarily for 6 years, for sure he can't. For sure he's not part of the. Yoimar Taishav al Yoimar Sacher. So why do I need both words in the pasuk to teach me that they can't eat truma? If you say one of them, it would teach me the other one. If you're acquired for 50 years, you're not allowed to eat truma. For sure, if you're acquired for 6 years, you can't eat truma. Gemara explains, we need to get back to something where this is all to explain something else. But I didn't say a bracha yet, right? Imkain, if it only would have said Taishav and not Sacher, then I would have translated it as follows. I would have said Taishav Zekanikin Shanim, that you know what it means, a Taishav, someone that dwells with the owner. That's talking about someone that was acquired for 6 years. He dwells with the owner. But if he's actually acquired for 50 years, I would have understood that he actually does eat. When it says Taishav, I would have thought that it's a regular Eved Ivri that's only for 6 years. So Basacher, therefore it has to tell me both of them. The limit al Taishav, the Sachar teaches me that Taishav means the 50-year one, as opposed to Taishav meaning the 6-year one, and then a 5th-year one would actually eat. So when I have both of them, then I know what both of them helps me with the translation. And they both don't eat. So I need both of them. So now we have to go back to what we're saying. We said that why does it say Ela Kodesh Pnima? The blood wasn't taken to the Kodesh, to the inside. Because if it would have only said Kodesh, we said just say Kodesh. Why do you need Pnima? Pnima sounds like the Kodesh HaKadoshim. If it would have said Kodesh, it would have said that Kodesh means Kodesh HaKadoshim. That would invalidate it. But how do you know it's invalidated when it's in the Heichal? So it says Pnima, which means the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and it says Kodesh, which means the Heichal. So I have both of them. Amalei Abaya says to Rabba, it's cute what you told me, explaining the pasuk based on this other thing about Truma with the Eved Ivri. Bishlei Mahasam. He says 1 second. Over there, great goofy ninu. I have 2 people. One is Taisha. One is Eved Ivri. He's called the Nirtza. His ear was bored. And then I have the other one, the regular Eved Ivri. Afagav, the Havleila Krol Mechtav Nirtza leYoichal. The pasuk could have said that the Nirtza shouldn't eat. The Idach, Asi B'Kal V'Chaimer. And if the Nirtza can't eat, then for sure the other one can't eat because he's only there for 6 years. He's not part of the Kayin family. I could have got with the Kal V'Chaimer, but however, Milsa Asi B'Kal V'Chaimer Tarach V'Kasav L'Kra. But sometimes we have this rule where even though I could have had it with the Kal V'Chaimer, but the pasuk writes it anyway, and it's usually the pasuk doesn't waste words. So if you could have a Kal V'Chaimer, then maybe it would do the Kal V'Chaimer and not have to say. It says no. So sometimes I could have done it like that. You're right, but Milsa Dasi B'Kal V'Chaimer, the pasuk bothers itself to write it, to spell it out. Just because it's a Kal V'Chaimer doesn't mean that it doesn't spell it out. Okay, Elahacha, but when it comes to us, when it comes to the blood going into the Kodesh or the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he says 1 second. There's one blood. Even the ifsal behechal hacha lifnai belifnim my boy. 1 second. As you're getting through the heichal to get to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, it's already puzzle. So the Kodesh HaKadoshim is adding nothing. You can't get to the Kodesh HaKadoshim without invalidating it in the heichal. Over there, I had 2 different people. I had this Eved and that Eved, and they have to tell me which one. If it would have said this, I could have learned the other one, but we wrote it anyway. But over here, it's totally extra, because once it goes into the Heichal, it becomes puzzle. And if you take it into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, it was already puzzle because it went through the Heichal. All it should have said is that it becomes puzzle in the Heichal. So that was Abaya's question to Rabbi. Elamar Abaya leinitzcha. Abaya says, rather, you know what the word Pnima is coming to teach me? It's teaching me something interesting. Elel derech meshupash. It's coming to tell me that it's possible to get into the Kodesh HaKadoshim through the back door. You'd go through the roof, or you'd go through, you sneak in, you tunnel in or something. That way, it would become invalid even without going through the Heichal. And that's why it would be necessary to say it. It's not that it became invalid already and it's all worthless. No, let's say you got through there was a ceiling in the Beis Hamikdash. They had an area above the floor, above the Heichal and Kodesh HaKadoshim, where they could open up the ceiling. They could lower someone down in a box to fix the walls and this, so he shouldn't see the Aron and everything. They would just lower him against the wall, and they would be able, like they have.
By the big buildings.
Like the big buildings, they have the outside the window washers that go up and down the thing. In the Twin Towers, Alav Shalom, they had window washers, electronic window washers that went up every month. This machine that went up, every window was washed every month, and they didn't have to send someone down outside doing that. They had this spongy thing that would go up and down, and a little what's it called? A rail, like in the stone. Anyway, you have to think of everything. Okay. So Abaya says that why it's necessary because of this. He's answering for Rabba's pshat, telling him that it could be that you can get through in another way, and so therefore, is he answering for Rabba's pshat? I guess so. This is answering for Rabba. Okay. Amalei Rava. Rava says to Abaya, or maybe it's Rabba. It's not true. It's only going to be puzzle if you take the blood in the normal way of walking through the front door. It's not going to be puzzle if you sneak it in through a hole in the wall or through a hole in the ceiling and get through it. And that's not going to be puzzle. It says hava, asher yuva, hein la yehuva, right? It has to be brought in through the normal manner. Ela marava, rather Rava says that the word we're asking here, what's the word pnima coming to teach me? Kol midi the chashav alei lefnai v'lefnim le'mifsa behechal. Rava comes up with a chiddush. It says like this. If your intention was to bring it into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, so it actually doesn't become invalid as you're walking through. If your intention was to bring it into the Heichal, it becomes invalid in the Heichal. If your intention was to bring it to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and in order to get to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you have to walk through the Heichal wouldn't invalidate it because that wasn't your intention. If you would step out and not make it all the way to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, it would still be kosher. It's only if you intended to bring it into the Heichal and you brought it into the Heichal, it becomes pasul. Yeah, chiddush. Intention matters. Sounds like the other opinion that we had, where we said that if it was b'shaygig, Reb Shimon said, right? Who told us if it was b'shaygig, it's going to be kasher? Rabbi Yehuda, michnas shaygig kasher. Sounds like Rabbi Yehuda. You need kavana. Maybe not. Okay. Boy, Rava. Yeah, Rava has a question. This Rava's question here is, I believe it's a famous question. I have it in my head from other places. Parhelam davar shel tzibur. There's a few questions we're gonna have here. Parhelam davar shel tzibur is the sacrifice that's brought if the community sins based on a psak of the Sanhedrin. Majority of the community sins. They have to bring this par helam davar, the bull of forgotten matter, right? But they made a mistake. Sir Avodas Kavim, or the goat of Avodah Zarah, where the Besdin says that this type of service is not considered Avodah Zarah. And then they realize that was a mistake, so they have to bring this goat. Now, the blood of these two animals is taken inside the sanctuary. And the animal itself is burnt outside. This is called chatois pnimius. The blood goes inside. Rava's question is like this. These two sacrifices, what happens if instead of taking it into the sanctuary, you take it into the Kodesh HaKadoshim? You went too far. Do we say ki amrina nela kodesh pnima? Do we say it says into the sanctuary, into the Kodesh HaKadoshim? When would it be a problem to take it into the Kodesh HaKadoshim if there was a problem to take it into the Kodesh? But over here, you're supposed to take it into the Kodesh. So maybe the door's already open. The door's already open. You step on the tile in the front and it opens the door. You can walk in. So it's not a problem. If there's no problem with taking it into the Kodesh, then there's no problem with Pnima. If there was a problem with taking it into the Kodesh, then there's a problem with Pnima. If there's no problem with Kodesh, there's no problem with Oidilma, or perhaps Shleim Kamenu. Maybe 1 second. That's not where you belong. That's not where the blood belongs. It's still Shleim Kamenu. This is Rabbi's question. Should we invalidate that inner sanctum blood, carbon, if it goes further into the Kodesh HaKadoshim? If we say that it does become invalid because it doesn't belong there, what happens? The blood that's of the sacrifices of Yom Kippur, which actually do go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So you brought it into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and then you took it out. and then you brought it back in where it wasn't supposed to go back in. Do we say that you invalidate the sacrifice? There's other things that you had to do beforehand, right? You had to sprinkle the blood here and there. But let's say you went back inside into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Would you invalidate the sacrifice? Because you don't belong there now. It was in the time you don't belong there. You belong there before, but now the blood doesn't belong in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Mi Amrina, do we say Mekaimenu? What do you mean? This blood is eligible to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. My Dilma, or maybe we should say that it was eligible, but now that it left, nafak means to leave. Once it left, it left. Let's say there's like a flow chart, right? If you say this, then you keep following the inside. Remember that joke with the guy that went to the bar mitzvah? There were two doors. It says if you're a relative, go to this door. If you're not a relative, go through that door. So he wasn't a relative, so he goes through the door. And there was another two doors. It says if you brought a present, go to this door. If you didn't bring a present, go to that. And he didn't have a present, so he finds himself in the parking lot. Okay. Anyway, so this all these imtim talaymars. Imtim talaymar. If you say like this, then what's going to be next? Imtim talaymar. If you say halav enough and nafik, that once you leave the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you're not allowed to go back in. And if you do go back in, you invalidate the blood, and which means you invalidate the sacrifice. Now, take a look at this. Let's say you left. So far, so good. You sprinkled the blood on the preiches. Okay, so far, so good. And then you go to do the mizbeach. Now, the pasuk, when it says to sprinkle on the mizbeach, it's talking about the mizbeach hapnimi, the four corners of the inner mizbeach, the mizbeach hakteres. And it calls that haitzah. It says that you leave to there, even though it's in the same room, the preiches in the mizbeach, but it says that you leave. It's considered leaving because you're going out to the outer part of the room. The room is like divided in half. You go to the outer part. What happens? V'chnisan, and then you go back towards the preiches in the same room, but closer to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It says, what's going to be the din? Over here, it's all in the same heichal, so it should be no problem. Dilma 1 second. Pasuk says, "V'yatza el hamizbeach," and he'll go to the altar. Sounds like he was supposed to leave. Now he's going back. It doesn't belong there. Gemara says, leave this as a question. Interesting. Usually, I think when we say imtim tulaymar, I think the poskim understand that is what the Gemara is paskening. Imtim tulaymar. If we say this, then the Gemara is actually is saying that. Yeah. What was the story with the mimer? There was a mimer. I forget the story that one of the Rebbeim said a mimer, and he said Ula yesh laimar, and then the son or the chassid said the mimer over, and to someone else. And he didn't say Ula yesh laimar. He said it as Ula yesh laimar means perhaps you can say. He didn't say that. And when he came back to the Rebbe said, how did you say it? Did you say Ula yesh? And he said, no, I said it. That. So he said, good. Like in the Gemara, imtim talayim, perhaps you can say, if you say, the Gemara actually paskins like that. Okay, anyway. They called someone, one of the Maimarim, I think the Rebbe Rashab wrote Tzarachian or something, and one of the Chassidim tried to answer it. And so they thought that wasn't correct. The Rebbe has a Tzarachian, what do you mean? You're going to answer it? So they called him the Spinoza of Chassidus. Spinoza was the renegade, Okay. Now it says, Nichnas lechaper, if someone took the blood inside to make an atonement, but he didn't actually do the atonement. So the Mishnah said that Rebbe Lezer says, in other words, he didn't do the application of the blood. He just brought it in. He crossed over the threshold, but he didn't apply it to the altar. Rebbe Lezer says that invalidates, and Rebbe Shimon says it's still good. That was what we learned in the Mishnah. Machlekes Rebbe Lezer and Rebbe Shimon. Tanya Rebbe Lezer Eimer. Tanya was taught in a brayso, Rabbi Eliezer. This is Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes. It's interesting that he's arguing with Reb Shimon, who's several generations later. It would be better if it would be Rebbe Lazar, because then they would be friends. Rebbe Lazar ben Shamua, but I don't see that in the text, so I'm not going to make that up. Tanya Rebbe Lazar Reimer Nemer Khan. It's one pasuk says that any blood that's brought into the oil mayed, it says lechaper b'kodesh, to atone in the holies, shall not be eaten. It should be burnt. That means it becomes invalid. B'nemer lahalan, and then I have another pasuk talking about Yom Kippur. It says v'chalodem le'yeh ba'oil mayed v'lechaper b'kodesh. No man should be in the sanctuary when the Kohen Gadol goes inside to do the atonement. Now we do a called the Gzeira Shava, a verbal analogy. Over here it says Lechaper, and over there it says Lechaper. Lechaper, in one pasuk is talking about no one should be inside the sanctuary when the Kohen Gadol enters with the intention of doing the atonement. No one should be in there. And the other pasuk is that any blood that's brought into the sanctuary to atone is invalid. So the question is, when it says to atone, what does it mean? Does it mean that the atonement was done, or does it mean with the intention to atone? So it goes malahalan, just as over there when it kept talking about the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, they weren't allowed to be there even before he did the atonement. B'shalei Kippur, even when he enters to do the atonement, no one was allowed to be there. So when it says atonement, it's referring to before the atonement. So Afkan, so also over here when it says that the sacrifice becomes invalid if the blood is brought inside to atone, it means even if the atonement wasn't done. Okay, that's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Reb Shimon says, Nemar kan lechaper. Here it says to atone. Nemar la'alan. And another pasuk says it's talking about the blood. The lechaper, the first one, is talking about that any chatas, that the blood goes inside, becomes invalid. Nemar la'alan. And it talks about the chatayis apnimius of Yom Kippur, the sacrifice of Yom Kippur. It says vespara chatas vesira chatas eshuva es dama lechaper b'kodesh. The blood of the chatas and the blood of the bull of the bull chatas and the blood of the goat chatas. Right, the par and the sar of Yom Kippur, that the blood was brought into the holies. It says that the flesh is taken outside and burned. The malahalan b'shekiper, just like by those two chatais, yeah, the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur. It's talking about where the blood was actually applied. So Afkan, also over here, when we're talking about that it becomes invalid if you bring it inside, b'shekiper, it's talking about if it was actually applied, not if you just entered it in, you just passed over the threshold. That's Reb Shimon's view. As he learns from context, verbal analogy, context in another place, what lechaper means, atone, means that it was actually done. So over here also means that it was actually done. Okay. But my kamiflagi, 1 second. I could do this 2 ways. I have this pasuk, I have that pasuk, I have different ways of doing this. So what is this referring to? What is this? What is the machlekes? Mar savar dan nechutz michutz. But Rabbi Lezer holds that we learn the chatas that we're talking about is the blood is supposed to be outside. And we're learning out from another person that's not supposed to be in the sanctuary when the Kohen Gadol goes inside. He's supposed to be outside. The chatas is supposed to be outside. The person's supposed to be outside, right? You're trying to teach me a halacha from a chatas that's supposed to go inside. So we're not doing that. We're talking about the 2 psukim that we have, that if the blood enters in when it's not supposed to, it becomes invalid. And if a person goes inside, he's not supposed to. He's supposed to be outside. So that's a good comparison. He doesn't like the comparison of the blood that's not supposed to go inside versus the blood that is supposed to go inside and is atoned. So that's not a good comparison because it's too different. Marsavar, Reb Shimon holds, said, I'd rather learn an animal from an animal, or the blood of an animal from the blood of an animal, than the blood of an animal to a person that's not supposed to be inside. He says that's not a good comparison. Okay. Talking about like what would be the more comparable. Rabbi Yehuda says that if the blood enters in by mistake, unintentionally, then the sacrifice is still valid. He said you weren't supposed to take the blood of a sacrifice into the sanctuary. If you did, it's still valid. mazid. But if you did it on purpose, pasul, right? Then it's going to be invalid. Very interesting, because Rabbi Yehuda doesn't mention, but we'd really like to hear. You brought it in by mistake. We say that it's still kosher. If you brought it in unintentionally, then it's going to be invalid. We had a machlekes. When you bring it in, did you have to? Does it only invalidate the sacrifice if the application of the blood was done, according to Reb Shimon, or is it even if there was no application of blood, according to Rabbi Eliezer? So Rabbi Yehuda doesn't tell me what I would like for him to spell out. He says, I know if you bring it in on purpose, it becomes invalid, but spell out the next part of the machlekes. Spell out what's your opinion about the next thing. It says, b'shekeeper or b'shlei Is he following the opinion of Reb Shimon that it's only if the atonement was, only if the application of blood was done, it's going to be invalid? Or even like Rabbi Eliezer, if the atonement wasn't done. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Mash Mashinemar, you can learn this from the Pasuk. I'm sorry?
I understood the status changed after the application of the blood, and I thought that after the application of the blood, like it was already concluded, like it wouldn't change.
Yeah, I think you're thinking about something else. We learned that if the blood is applied already outside, and then you took the blood inside, so the sacrifice was already valid. So it doesn't affect the kosher sacrifice. It doesn't get invalidated later. That's not what we're referring to here. We're talking about the blood wasn't applied outside. We're taking the blood inside. Now the question is, when you get inside, the sacrifice becomes invalid. Is it only after the application of the blood on the inner altar, which it's not supposed to be? Or is it just when it crosses over the threshold of the door, it becomes invalid? That's Machlekes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon. So when Rabbi Yehuda says it's not invalid when it's done unintentionally, but if it's intentional, it is invalid, follow with the next, does that mean after it's applied, or even if it's not applied, he doesn't finish up?
Intentionally, because he thinks that is another sacrifice, so he messed up.
Yeah. So, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah says, "Mimash mashenemar." We can understand. We can come to a conclusion here for this question based on the pasuk. It says, "Vespara chatas vesira chatas ashehu vesdam aloyel meid lechaper b'kodesh." It's talking about the two animals, the bull and the goat, that on Yom Kippur, with the blood is brought into the holies, into the holy of holies. You have to take the rest of it out to burn. That's what the pasuk says. Ma Talmud Laimar v'haseiref. Why does it have to say that the one that burns it has to wash his clothing? The Gemara says, Ma Talmud Laimar v'haseiref. What do you mean? The Gemara asks a question on a question. That's the Jewish way of answering a question. You answer a question with another question. What do you mean? You're asking about haseiref. Look, gufay. It's just you need it for itself. It's what type of question is that? It has to tell me that the person that burns it has clothing become tummy. Rather, what what he wanted to bring out over here, the brisa says, parachatas vesirachatas, the bull of the sin offering and the goat of the sin offering. Why does it have to say a chatas by each one? It could say par vesar hachatas. It doesn't have to say chatas by each one, right? Get a wedding invitation. It says Rabbi and Mrs. Smith. It doesn't say Rabbi Smith and Mrs. Smith. It says Rabbi and Mrs. Smith. Put it together. Par b'sar hachatas. Put it together. It says Lafish le'lamadnu el lepar b'sar shel yom kippurim shenesrafim ben beis hadesh mitam begadim. But rather, it's coming to tell us that the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur that are burnt on the Beis Hadeshin, which is outside, they have to take them outside. The blood goes inside, but the flesh goes outside. And mitamin begadim, it contaminates the clothing of the person that burns it. That's what happens. He burns it, he has to wash his clothes. Shar nisrafim. What about other things that also get burnt? Minayin, how do you know that that's the same halacha? Chatas. We have the chatas twice. Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda saying. So far, Rabbi Yirmiyah didn't tell me anything about what Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is about Bishop Keeper. I get Rabbi Yehuda says that the blood that goes inside by mistake doesn't invalidate, and if it's intentional, it does invalidate. But I don't know if it means if it's applied or not applied. He's quoting this brisa that seemingly has nothing to do with what we're talking about. It says the chatas twice, which tells me you have to wash your clothes for other things. Okay, what does it have to do with the application of the blood? Reb Meir says no. Didn't have to say lechaper. Why does it say? What does it say? Lechaper. I'll call him a skaprim shasar from time begadim. The word lechaper teaches me to atone, according to Reb Meir, teaches me that anything that's an atonement, if you burn it, you have to wash your clothing. The clothing come tummy. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yirmiyah now is concluding his proof. Rabbi Yehuda lechaper le mashmalei. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't learn from lechaper in that pasuk of Yom Kippur. My timer. What's the reason why he doesn't learn from lechaper like Rabbi Meir? He learns from chatas. Why doesn't he learn from lechaper? La mishum de mibayle legzera shava. This is the genius Rabbi Yirmiyah. But we did not see this coming at all. What Rabbi Yirmiyah does is he tells me, machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir, where to learn about burning, someone that burns a sacrifice, you have to wash his clothes. Rabbi Meir's opinion is lechaper. We learned from lechatas. Now we want to know, what is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion over here in our Mishnah regarding a machlekes between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon? If the blood enters in, does it have to be applied? Or even if it's not applied, the sacrifice is invalid. So where did Rabbi Shimon learn it from? He learned it from a pasuk in about the blood of the chatas that goes inside, and over there it says lechaper. That means only after the atonement is done. Why doesn't Rabbi Yehuda learn like Rabbi Meir when it comes to the burning? The one that burns has to wash his clothes, because his lechaper he uses for what Rabbi Shimon used the lechaper for, which was that it's coming to teach me that only after the atonement is done, does the sacrifice become invalid. So it's proving that that Rabbi Yehuda uses that pasuk for something else. Yeah, you follow. Isn't that great? Which means that he follows Rabbi Yehuda, holds like Rabbi Shimon. Okay. This is like a pilpul. That's a pilpul. This what Rabbi Yirmiyah just did. That's a classic pilpul. You answer a question based on something else that seemingly has nothing to do with this, but you prove the fact that one of the verses wasn't used, and you don't know why. It's coming to answer a question here. Okay. We'll start a new parak. Hadran Loch calls us in the Sarv. Mizbeach Mekadesh. We learned this before, that when something goes on the altar, it doesn't come down. Once it goes up, it doesn't come down. Even if there was a good reason that it shouldn't have gone up because it was puzzle or something. Nevertheless, once it goes up, it stays up. It gets grandfathered in. It was up, and that's it. Even though the rule is that it doesn't belong there, but once it was up, it stays up. However, that's only esaroyle, only something that was meant to be on the altar, designated. The Gemara is going to say that it's coming to exclude the kmitza of a mincha that wasn't put into a klishar, wasn't designated yet. It's not roy for the mizbeach. Anyway, let's go further. What does it mean? Esaroyle. Rabbi Yeshua Aimer Kolorei Leishim. Yeshua says anything that's meant to go on the fire, I should say pyre, right? With a P-Y-R-E, right? Anything that's supposed to go on the pyre. What do they have over there? Do they say fire or pyre? They say fire. Rabbi Yeshua, yeah. Anything that's meant to go on that's eligible to go on the fire, im Allah la yerid. Once it goes up, you don't take it down. Shneimar hi ha'oila al maikta. This is the oila on the fire. Ma oila shirul ishim, just like the oila, the elevation offering. What does it say? Fire? It says pyre. P-Y-R. It says pyre. Just like the oila, which goes on the pyre, it's real ishim, it goes on the fire. That's okay. I'm also latered. So once it goes up, you don't take it down. So too, afkol shirul ishim mamala layered. We learn it from hi ha'oila al maikta. Maikta means tukat. It means to burn. Something that gets burnt. Something that's supposed to get burnt doesn't come down. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Gamliel Aimer. Rabbi Gamliel says, Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Gamliel were contemporaries. Rabbi Gamliel was the one that made Rabbi Yeshua stand 3 times. Remember, they demoted Rabbi Gamliel because of the way he treated Rabbi Yeshua. Remember that Gemara in Brachas. They took him off from his position. He became because of the way he treated Rabbi Yeshua. Anyway, here's a machlekes Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Gamliel says, "Kol ha'royalim is beyach imal layerd." It doesn't have to do with what's on the fire. It has to do with what's on the altar. What's the difference, altar and fire? Well, not everything that goes on the altar gets burnt. There's libations. There's wine that gets poured. There's other things, right? So he oila al makdal mizbeach ma oila shirei mizbeach im also later just like the oila which goes on the altar it doesn't come down. Afkol shu davar shirei mizbeach im also later goes on the altar doesn't come down. The Mishnah itself elaborates to explain what just happened here in this machlekes. It says ein bein divram Gamliel divra Rabbi Yeshua ela dam v'nesachim. The difference between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Gamliel would be the blood, which does not go on the fire. It gets applied to the wall, right? It doesn't go on the actual fire on the altar. And also the nesachim, which is the pouring of the wine, that also doesn't go on the fire. It just goes on. It gets poured into the holes.
On the altar.
Yeah. All of this is on the altar. Just Rabbi Eliezer says that the main. I'm sorry, not Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Gamliel says the main criteria here is the altar. Yeshua says the main criteria here is the fire. Now, what's the difference? Blood and libations. They go on the altar, but they don't go on the fire. So according to Rabbi Gamliel, once they're up, they don't come down. According to Rabbi Yeshua, no. If they don't belong there, you take them down. They're not on the fire. Okay. So Rabbi Gamliel amar la yerit. Rabbi Gamliel says that you don't take it down, the blood and the nesachim. Rabbi Yeshua amar yerit. Rabbi Yeshua says you do take it down. So that doesn't go on the fire. Reb Shimon Aimer, Reb Shimon says, "Hazevach kosher, v'nesachim psulim." Let's say the sacrifice itself was kosher, but the wine that was supposed to come along with it is puzzle. How did it become puzzle? It became tummy. It became tummy, or it went outside and it wasn't supposed to. Or let's say the opposite. Hanesachim ksherim v'hazevach puzzle. The libations are kosher, but the carbon itself was puzzle. How did it become puzzle? Whatever. Taken out. Afilu zev psulim, even if they're both puzzle. So hazevach layered banasachim yardu. Sounds like he's saying exactly like Rabbi Yeshua, that the sacrifice stays up, but the nesachim you take down. Now, however, Rashi points out let's wait for this to come up. Yeah. The Gemara is going to explain this when we turn the page. Mizbeach only consecrates something that comes on its own. But the Nesachim that come because of the sacrifice don't stay up. Okay, let's see. We'll see in the Gemara. So now the Gemara says like this. Let's see. Royalai, what does the altar retain that once you bring it up it doesn't go down? That's only royalai. Ain't royalai in. What goes up on what's eligible for the altar? Yes, ain't royalai lai. But what's not eligible, it doesn't retain. Right? If it doesn't belong there, then you take it down, even though it went up. Lamute mai. What are you coming to tell me? It doesn't stay up. Amar Rav Papa. Papa says, we're talking about the kaimetz, the scoop of the mincha that wasn't put into the holy vessel. where there it wasn't eligible yet to go on the altar. The mincha itself was put into a holy vessel. But after you do the kmitza, you have to put the kmitza into another holy vessel. Right? And that because that's going to go on the altar. The rest of the mincha is just eaten. To go on the altar, it has to go into a holy vessel for the altar. It wasn't completely eligible yet. So Rav Papa, okay, Maskefla Ravina. Ravina asks a question on this. He says, "Maishna miduula. What's this different from Ula? Damar Ula. Ula says, a muri kachim kalim shehelan lefnei zrikas daman layardu shenasalach mishim mizbeach." He says, "Look, why is this different? If I have kachim kalim, the reason why he's talking about kachim kalim is because this is interesting. A kachim karban is already consecrated enough that there's me'ila. You can't have personal use of it. Kachim kalim, there's no me'ila until the blood is sprinkled. Till the blood is sprinkled. Once the blood is sprinkled, then there's me'ila on the imurim, on the limbs that need to now go on the altar. It says, so really, it's the sprinkling of the blood of the kachim kalim that really affect how consecrated this is. It says, but Ula says that if you take a kachim kalim carbon, let's say a shlamim, kachim kalim, it's of lesser holiness, you slaughter it, and before you sprinkle the blood, you already put the limbs on the altar, which was a mistake. Should you take them down? Ula says no. 1 second. It says because they become the bread of the mizbeach. They become already the food of the mizbeach. Now 1 second. When something that wasn't eligible to go on the altar, like for example the kaimets, it didn't go into a keli yet, and you put it on the altar, so you have to take it down. Why over here by the limbs before the blood, the limbs of the kachim kalim before the blood was supplied, you don't take it down. So the Gemara answers, Hanach leimechshu ma'ase begufayo. The limbs themselves are not lacking anything in themselves. It was just that the blood needed to go on the altar. Hani, but the kaimets, the scoop of the korban mincha, mechshu ma'ase begufayo, they themselves are missing something. They themselves needed to be placed in a vessel, and they weren't. So there was something missing in this offering itself, as opposed to the limbs, where the limbs are perfectly fine. It was just the blood from that animal needed to be applied. That's the difference over here. Who answers this question? Ravina asks. Rav Papa, maybe Rav Papa's answering.
This is temporary.
Yeah.
For the blood.
Yeah. That's what it sounds like. No, because once it goes up, it stays up. That's why we won't have that. Rabbi Shua, now we go back to quoting what Rabbi Shua said in the Mishnah. Anything that goes on the fire, the Mizbeach is Mekadosh, and we said he learned it from Hi ha'oila al maikta. This is the oila that goes on the fire. Just like the oila goes on the fire, it doesn't come down, so too everything that goes on the fire doesn't come down. Rabbi Gamliel said, Hi ha'oila al maikta al Mizbeach. Anything that goes on the Mizbeach doesn't come down. What does he do with the word al maikta, which means on the fire, on the pyre? My answers, Rabbi Gamliel uses that al maikta to teach me something else. It's coming to tell me the word paikin means like it pops off. Maybe it's like an onomatopoeia. Paikin. Maybe. Anyway, it's coming to teach me that a limb that was on the altar that popped off the altar, and that you have to go put it back on. You put it back on. Okay, so Rabbi Gamliel teaches me that the word maikta is coming to tell me something else, and therefore it's not coming to tell me that only things that are on the fire don't come down. Because that word, maikta, which fire, is coming to teach me that things that popped off the fire have to go back on. Not coming to tell me that things that go up on the altar that weren't supposed to be there only don't come down if they're meant to be on the fire. It's not coming to teach me that. That's what Rabbi Yeshua says is coming to teach me. Rabbi Gamliel says no. V'idach, what is it? How does Rabbi Shua know that things that ladurat paikin minale? How does he know that if someone went on the fire and it popped off, that you have to put it back on? Yeah. Nafkalei me asher teichal ha'ish. We learned it from that the fire consumes. It's a pasuk that says the fire consumes. It says the kohen puts on the clothing, he does the Hiram Sadeshan, he does Truma Sadeshan from what the fire consumed. The fire consumed means it has to consume it. It means if it started to burn it, then it has to put it back on. V'idach. Why doesn't Ram Gamliel learn from that pasuk? It says, Hahu, the pasuk that Rabbi Yeshua used, Mi boyle kuli oyla tamachser. Yatamachser kuli k'teres. It's coming to tell me specifically, things that are meant to be the animal sacrifices. Those are the ones that you have to, if they pop off, you have to put them back on. But if he's burning incense on the inner mizbeach, and that pops off, the incense popped off somehow, that you don't have to put back on. Oh, that's little pieces probably. You don't have to put that back on. The Tani Reb Chanina bar Menyumi, Berebi Elazar ben Yaakov. This I didn't see before. Reb Chanina bar Menyumi, the son of Reb Elazar ben Yaakov. I thought it would have been like in the name of, but it's not. It's actually 4 generations here. Reb Chanina bar Menyumi, Berebi Elazar ben Yaakov. He says, he explains, Asher teichal ha'eish es ha'oila al mizbeach, that the fire consumes the oila on the altar. Akule oila tamachser akule k'tayres. Okay. What we just did now is we explained that Ram Gamliel uses the pasuk of Asher teichal ha'eish to tell me that only the oila offerings needs to be put back on, but not the ketayres. Only animal offerings need to get put back on, but not not ketayres. V'idach, what does Rabbi Shua do? He learns the pasuk. He learns to teach me that you have to put the ones that pop off, you have to put them back on. So how's he gonna know that it's only the animal offerings and not the ketayres? So it says and he says that we understood already from the beginning of the pasuk. We understood that we're dealing with the oila. It says oila. You don't have to. You don't need a special lima to teach me that it's only the oila and not the ketayres. Okay. Rabbi Gamliel says anything that's eligible to go on the altar, once it goes up, it doesn't come down. And what Rabbi Gamliel is really saying is that even if it's not eligible for the fire, it still doesn't come down. Rabbi Yeshua Nami Haksiv Mizbeach. What is it now? The Gemara is doing what we did to Rabbi Gamliel. The Gemara is now doing to Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua says that only things that go on the fire don't come off the altar once they're put up. Rabbi Gamliel says even things that go on the altar that don't go on the fire, they also, once they go up, they don't come down. Rabbi Yeshua Nami Haksiv Mizbeach. It says here al Miktal Mizbeach. Why isn't Rabbi Yeshua more inclusive? This law like Rabbi Gamliel is. So Gemara explains Hahu, that pasuk of al Mizbeach, like supposed to take out the word taima. Maikam Rachmana. What is the Eibishter saying? What is Hashem saying? Kol Arayla Maikta Mekadesh Mizbeach. Anything that's eligible for the fire, the altar consecrates. Smart altar. Like smart home?
Yeah, it only accepts what it's meant for.
So, but the idea over here is that the Mizbeach is Mekadesh. It's not the fire that's Mekadesh. It's the altar. Vidach, how does Rabbi Gamliel know that it's the Mizbeach that's Mekadesh? He already said that only things that go on anything that goes on the altar. It says Mizbeach Achrin Aksiv. It says twice Mizbeach. Vidach, what does Rabbi Shua do with the other Mizbeach? He said Chad lehecha dehaisa l'shasa kaiser, v'chad lehecha dehaisa l'shasa kaiser. So, sometimes the animal was eligible and then it became not eligible, and sometimes it was never eligible. That both of them, if they're brought on the altar, it's going to be Mekadeshet, and it doesn't come off. V'idach, how does Rabbi Gamliel know both of those things? If he uses Mizbeach to teach me that it's only things that go on, that it's even things that don't go on the fire. It says, Kivin de Psulim Nenu, It says once we say that things that are invalid, the Mizbeach is Mekadeshit B'Rabbeinu Rachmana, and the Eibishter says that once they go up, they don't come down. Lo Yishna, it doesn't matter how invalid it is. We know it all together from one limud. Yeah? Yeshua said we're dividing it up. Gamliel says, no, we could understand both of those together. Okay, now, Reb Shimon Oimer, a Zevach kasher, and Reb Shimon then went on to say, if the Zevach is kasher and the Nesachim are pasul, if the Nesachim are pasul and the Zevach is kasher, Zevach means the animal sacrifice, and the Nesachim means the libations. So once they go up, the animal stays up and the Nesachim come down. And what we explained, based on what the Gemara we're about to learn, is that Reb Shimon holds that only things that come on their own, that aren't part of another sacrifice, they come independently, stay on the altar, even if they're invalid. But things that come together with something else, things that are dragged along something else, for example, the part of a package, the nesachim that are dragged along because of the karban, if those aren't eligible, you take them off. Okay. Tanya was taught in a brisa. The brisas sometimes elaborate more than the Mishnah does, so get extra details. Shimon Aimer, Reb Shimon says, Oila. It says in the pasuk regarding the halacha, that the mizbeach consecrates what goes on it. It says the word Oila, goes up. Ma Oila haba b'glal atzma, just like the Oila, which is an elevation offering, is entirely consumed by the fire. It comes on its own. It's not coming because of some other thing. Afkal haba b'glal atzman, coming to include anything else that comes on its own independently, also stays on the altar. But it's coming to exclude libations that come dependent on the karban. They don't come independently. So therefore, if they are not eligible, they come down. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Aimer, we're going to get some extra opinions here. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, because there's a pasuk that says anything that touches the altar becomes consecrated. Shemei I would understand bein roi, bein she'ein roi. I would understand that anything that touches, whether it's eligible or whether it's not eligible, once it goes on the altar, you don't take it down. Talmud Laimar, the pasuk says, kvasim. Let me take a look at this. This is what you should do on the altar. You should bring up the carbon tamid twice a day. Now, kvasim. Ma kvasim ru'uyim afkol roi. Just like kvasim are eligible on the altar, it says that kvasim go on the altar. This is what you should do to the altar. You should put on a kvasim, which means sheep, lambs. So too, and only things that are eligible for the altar. So Rabbi Yossi Aglili so far is saying that it could have thought even things that aren't eligible. Pasuk says kvasim, only things that are eligible. Rabbi Kiva says that oila. It says in the pasuk oila. Ma oila ruya afkol ruya. Just like the oila is eligible, the burnt offering, so to anything that's eligible, the mizbeach consecrates it and it stays on the altar. My beinayo. It says, what's the difference between Rabbi Yossi Aglili that he learned from kvasim to Rabbi Akiva that says oila? Amar Rav Barava says oila sa'oif psula ikabinayo. The difference between them is if there's an oila sa'oif that was not eligible, a bird, not eligible. If we learn like Rabbi Yossi Aglili says kvasim, that would only mean animals, right? Mar ma'isile me'oila. Rabbi Akiva learns it from the oila, this is also an oila. So oila sa'oif is also stays on the altar. Mar ma'isile me'kvasim, but Rabbi Yossi Aglili learns from the sheep, from the lambs. Lambs are not birds. So only the lambs stay up, the birds would come down. That would be the difference between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva. One second. But Rabbi Yossi Aglili, I know he learns from kvasim, but the fact is, it also says oila. What does he do with that? That would include oila sa'oif. The Gemara says iksiv kvasim v'leiksiv oila. If it would only said the lambs and it didn't say the oila haba mina filu mechayim, we would have understood that even if you walk an animal up the altar while it's alive, you would have understood that it has to stay up there. You don't take it down. So Kasar Rachmana Oila tells me the burnt offering, the elevation means no, it's already eligible to go on the altar. It was already slaughtered. And then, okay. What do we do with Rabbi Akiva? He learns from Oila that, and therefore it would also include the bird. Problem is, it says kvasim, which means lamb, which would exclude the bird. So iksiv Oila v'leiksiv kvasim. It would only say Oila, won't say lambs. Have minafilu mincha. I could have thought that even a karban mincha that's brought on the altar remains on the altar even if it's invalid. Because Rachmana Kvasim tells me Kvasim that only things that are living, not while they're alive though, after the slaughter, once they're put on the altar, which including in that is the animals and the birds, once they go on the altar, they don't come down. How's it opposed to the mincha? Ma yi'ika ben hani tanoi lahani tanoi de masnisim. Gemara now elaborates. I had two opinions in the Mishnah. I had Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Gamliel, and now I have in the Brisa I have Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Gamliel, they argued about nesachim and blood. If it goes on the altar and it wasn't supposed to. In the Brisa I have Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva arguing about birds if they go on the altar. Okay. What's the difference? Bein hani tanai lahani tanai de masnisin. Rav Papa says kmatzim shekitshu bekeli yikabeinayo. A kaimetz that was already put into the vessel, which we said if it wasn't on the vessel, it doesn't go on. If it went on the altar, you have to take it down. But a kaimetz that did go in the vessel, what happens now? Latana didan, according to the author of our Mishnah, which is Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Gamliel, fact is it's right. So therefore, la yerdu, you don't take it down because the kaimetz, the scoop, went into a vessel. You don't take it down. Tanai de masnisa, but the tanaim of masnisa means a brisa. The rule is that anytime there's only one nun, masnisa, there's only one nun in that, it means it's a brisa. Masnisin means our Mishnah. Masnisa, it's a brisa. So they say that it's only bali chayim, it's only things that are alive. They learned from Oila and Kvasim. So therefore, the mincha would be taken down, the yerdu. Amar Rish Lakish. The Gemara says Rish Lakish Amar, but it's corrected to say Amar Rish Lakish. Amar Rish Lakish, the difference between Rish Lakish Amar and Amar Rish Lakish is Rish Lakish telling me a new halacha or is he arguing on something that we said? Rish Lakish Amar would mean that he's arguing. Amar Rish Lakish means new speech, nothing to do with before. Rish Lakish says Mincha ba b'fnei atzma. If there's someone brings a carbon mincha, not because it's part of another carbon where you have to bring flour and oil and wine, not that. It's its own mincha. The 5 types of minchas he wants to bring. L'divrei kulan leitered. Everyone would agree that you don't take it off the altar. Big chiddush. Once it goes up, you don't take it down, right? Big chiddush because we thought according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva you would. L'divrei Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Tell me again. Extras.
Could be if they're brought on their own.
If they're brought on their own, that was according to Reb Shimon, right? Reb Shimon said that they have to be brought independently. If they're brought.
But I thought that maybe to kind of remember that things that cannot be brought on their own, those are the ones that you can remove.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. Well, that's more often, right? I just have a question over here. How could he say Rabbi Yeshua Rabbi Gamliel? Maybe Rish Lakish is only talking about our Mishnah. The Divrei Kulan Leitered, talking about the Mincha. Divrei Rabbi Yossi Aglili Rabbi Akiva, according to Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi, then we're going to say Tered. Yes, the Kulan is limiting only to the sages of our Mishnah. It says Kulan means everyone. It doesn't mean everyone. It means just our Mishnah, which is Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, right? That was our Mishnah. Who was our Mishnah? Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Shimon. Shimon says if it comes independently, right? then it was okay. So according to those three opinions, that's what he means kulan. That's why he's saying kulan, because there's three. However, the Rabbi Yisrael, Rabbi Akiva, of the Brisa, then terid. You would take it off the altar because they say only things that are living. Mincha ba'mazevach, but let's say it comes together with a offering. Now it's only going to be l'divrei Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Yeshua later. According to Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua, you leave it on the altar. However, divrei kulan, but according to Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and Rabbi Akiva, you're going to leave it up. So kulan, the word kulan is being used when you have three. So Rabbi Shimon of our Mishnah, plus the two opinions of the Brisa, Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva, it's going to come off the altar because it's not. According to them too, because it's not living, it's just a flower, and according to Reb Shimon, because it doesn't come independently. What about the wine? Wine and the wine that comes on its own, not together with the sacrifice. The Divrei Kulan, according to everyone, Yerdu, it has to come down. Who's the everyone over here? So definitely according to the Brisa, Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva, right? Because they hold only things that were living, unlike animals and birds. What about Rabbi Yeshua? Rabbi Yeshua says that it needs to be on the fire. This doesn't go on the fire, so this would also come down. So that's why it's three. The Rabbi Gamliel, I missed Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon would hold that it would stay up because it's Ba'am B'fnei Atzman. The Rabbi Gamliel, according to Rabbi Gamliel, so then he says, oh, 1 second, what the Gemara is going to say, the Gemara will spell out Rabbi Shimon. The Rabbi Gamliel, he's going to say, if Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Shimon lo yerdu, it should not come down, it should stay on the fire. Why? Rabbi Gamliel says anything that goes on the altar, doesn't matter if it goes on the fire, right? Just the altar as itself keeps it up. And Rabbi Shimon says the fact that it comes on its own. What about the wine that comes together with a sacrifice? The divrei kulan, according to everyone, yerdu, you take it down. Now let's explain why. Rabbi Yeshua says it needs to go on the fire. It doesn't go on the fire, so you take it down. Rabbi Gamliel said, let's leave Rabbi Gamliel for a moment because it's going to say Rabbi Gamliel. According to Rabbi Shimon says only if it comes independently. This came dependent on the sacrifice. According to Rabbi Akiva and according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, it's not an animal or a bird, so you take it down. The Rabbi Gamliel, this is the one. Lechudei yerdo. According to Rabbi Gamliel himself, he says that things that go on the altar, so even if they're dependent and they're not animals, he says it still stays up. La yerdo, doesn't come down. The Gemara asks on Rish Lakish. The Gemara says, Pshita, what are you trying to do here? I mean, besides for confusing us, but you didn't really tell us a chiddush. You reorganized it. In a different pattern. My answers, mincha ba b'fnei atzmi tzrichli. The chiddush over here is that a mincha that comes on its own is a chiddush. Why? Uked Rava. Damar Rava misnadav minchas nesachim b'chol yom. How did we learn this? From what Shlakir says. I guess because one of the examples of Rish Lakish was a minchas nesachim that comes on its own. Nesachim abayim b'fnei atzman, which we didn't have that before. So the mincha abayim and the nesachim that come on its own, that's a chiddush. Like Rava says, the Amar Rava misnadav on the minchas nesachim b'chol yom, that a person can just donate whenever he wants. He can just donate wine. Yeah. The Gemara says v'nashminin kiderava. Why didn't he just say that he's teaches Rava's teaching? Why did he go through the whole thing to tell me one halacha of Rava? It says rather nesachim abayim mazevach etzrichle. Actually, it's coming to tell me something else. It's coming to tell me that the libations that come together with the sacrifice are not always brought together with the sacrifice. They come because of. It goes like this. The kamakar v'lamachar aliyay machara. Chara means acher. That's like a Yerushalmi language. Yerushalmi sometimes leaves out the olives They're both Aramaic, the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. But the Yerushalmi has like truncated, like a lot of the words are like you're missing half words. It's like an interesting dialect. Anyway, it says because a person could bring the sacrifice today and then bring the Nesachim on a later date, tomorrow or the next day. So according to Reb Shimon, this would be interesting because according to Reb Shimon, it's still coming because of a sacrifice, even though it's 2 days later. It says that you can bring the Nesachim even by night, even though the sacrifice is only brought by day. And also, you can bring it tomorrow, even if it was brought the day before. So I could have thought that maybe it's Nesachim that are coming on their own. And Reb Shimon would agree that you don't take it down because it's independent. Kamash Malan, he's coming to tell me that even though it's coming on another day, Reb Shimon would hold that it's still dependent on the carbon that was brought 2 days before, and you take it off the altar if it was not eligible. Okay, let's leave it over here. Okay. Have a good day, everyone. Have a good week. Shabbat Tov.